On this episode of Cinema Disaster, we're going to be talking about the 1991 slasher film Popcorn. It was directed by Mark Harrier, who most of you probably know from Porky's. He also wrote and directed and starred in the first episode of Freddy's Nightmares. This film was right out of the 80s, so it still has that 80s horror slasher quality to it. It's pretty much about a bunch of film students in college whose budgets get cut for their class. So in order to raise money for the class, and also to kind of have a little extra left over to do their own experimental film, they decide to do this old, like, all-night horror-thon at this old theater called Dreamland. And there's like 3 films they're doing, all with like a William Castle style gimmick tied into it. William Castle, as you all know from House on Haunted Hill, 13 Ghosts, and The Tingler. The 3 movies they're doing are like these old black and white B movies. One is called Attack of the Amazing Electrified Man, Mosquito, and there's one called The Stench. Well, the film stars Jill Schoelen as Maggie, who has been having these nightmares of a burning theater and these flashbacks and of these murders and all this stuff, and she don't know where they're coming from. They can't be, or she can't explain them, which all comes in important later in this movie. But so it's her film class that is putting on this this like grindhouse thing at the theater. Jill Schoelen you might know from DC Cab, When a Stranger Calls Back, or possibly the 1989 version of Phantom of the Opera, the one with Robert Englund. When they get to the theater and they start looking around, they end up finding this canister with a film in it called Possessor, which they find out was filmed by a guy by the name of Lanyard Gates, who was the head of this old film cult from the 60s. He used to drop acid and make these avant-garde films, and his films got laughed off the screen. And it turns out that he didn't like being laughed at, so he filmed this movie called Possessor, which he didn't shoot the ending, though. He played out the ending live on stage, and he ended up killing his entire family and set fire to the theater. His body was never found, and everybody thought that the film was destroyed, and it was just this big tragedy that happened, and this took place 15 years prior to when this movie takes place. So they're not sure whether or not Lanyard Gates is dead, or if he's alive, or what happened to him. It's just like this big mystery. And so once this whole midnight movie thing gets going, people start dying in the same ways that people in the films that they're watching are dying. So it's sort of like a whodunit. And the movie keeps you guessing throughout the whole thing of is it Lanyard Gates coming back from the dead? Is it one of the film students? Is it someone that's came to the movie to see? Or is it one of the film patrons? You're not sure. I saw this movie for the first time when it came out on VHS. I was with my dad, and we went to, back during the old mom and pop video stores, and my dad saw that and decided to rent it. And I remember seeing it and thinking that, it's kind of creepy, that the whole Possessor film thing was kind of creepy to me back then. But ultimately, this is a movie that has stayed with me over the years. And I just find it to be a very fun film, because if you're a fan of grindhouse cinema, or midnight movies, or things like that, B films, it incorporates all of that into the storyline. So that's definitely something that I think makes this movie a lot of fun. And it's a movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, but serious enough to where it makes a legitimate horror film. It also stars Dee Wallace, who you probably know from E.T. or Cujo, Ray Walston, who you may know from My Favorite Martian or Mr. Hand in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It stars Tom Villard from One Crazy Summer and My Girl. Tony Roberts, who was in Serpico, Annie Hall, and then you got Malcolm Danare, who was in the movie Christine, this really great film that I've mentioned before called Heaven Help Us. And he was probably best known as one of the Frogers in European Vacation. For the longest time, there was no official DVD or Blu-ray release. There was bootlegs running around conventions or even on the internet that you could get. But about, I guess, 2017, Synapse Films did a DVD Blu-ray combo collector's edition of this. I think it came in like a 10, and it was limited to only like 3,000 units. So I'm not sure if there's any available still or not. I'm sure you can buy them used on the internet, or maybe they still have some in stock. But as far as I know, that's the only DVD Blu-ray official release so far. So I know I was looking online for them, and some of them are a little pricey, but the VHS you can find fairly cheap. I know I found this at, I think, A-Pop Records in St. Louis when they were open, and they used to sell old VHS for really cheap. And I definitely think this film is worth your watch. If you like 80s slasher films, early 90s slasher horror films, or if you're a fan of midnight movies or kind of whodunit types of films, this is definitely one that would be right up your alley. And I'll be coming back soon with another review. I know me and Sam are going to come back and do The Faculty, and we're also going to do Disturbing Behavior pretty soon. And I've been saying it for a long time, but me and Darren are going to do Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. So I'll be back with those, and until next time, check out Popcorn and keep watching.
Obsessed.